Howdy, folks. Today we're going to talk about source credibility and the different criteria that we can use to assess sources as we find them and encounter them in our own lives and in our research. So we're going to look at 5 criteria, really 4. The first one's kind of a duh, that'll help us do that. So the first one is relevance. Relevance just means how closely associated is the thing that I found to the thing that I'm trying to learn. It's kind of a duh, makes sense. If I'm looking for information on vampire bats, reading an article about Dracula is probably not going to be that helpful. Maybe more relevantly, is if I'm looking for information on climate change and how it affects agriculture in Montana, and I find an article about, crops and climate change in Australia, there might be some correlation, but I'm betting there could be a better source with more relevant information out there. So that's kind of your first check. It's not really something we're going to assess. It's just got to be you checking, okay, does this actually help me answer the question that I'm trying to solve? Next, and more importantly, is authority of a source. So when I talk about authority, it's basically the credentials that a author or an organization has in writing about the subject they're writing about. So for example, if I'm reading a source and it's referencing economists or professors, people from academics who have studied things, professionals in the industry, or if it's talking about a journalist who has done their research, those are all really good authoritative people. So the author themselves doesn't necessarily have to have this authority, but they have to have talked to someone that has. A lot of time journalists, they won't be experts on, governmental policy, but they'll talk to the people who made that policy and, make sure that they can write about whatever's happening in a way that the rest of the world can understand it. So check the authority of your source. Next is perspective, and this is more of a evaluation of understanding what lens a source is looking at an issue from. Right. And let me explain what I mean by that. So if I'm reading, an article or a research study, and it's talking about how students really need to be hydrated to learn well, and just water is not enough, that they need to have all sorts of these salts and minerals and electrolytes to fully get their brain functioning. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm on board. And then I start looking at, who funded this source, or who provided, the backing for this? And it's from Coca-Cola. And you're like, oh, I get it, right? Coca-Cola is just trying to sell more Powerade or whatever. So looking at the funding of that source and looking at the reason why it was published as well is important. Was this published to inform the public, or was it published to persuade? I'll give you some examples. So Fox News versus CNN. Fox News tends to lean to the right, a little bit more conservative. CNN tends to lean to the left, a little bit more liberal. Right. So those are the lenses that these two news organizations are looking at different stories. It's not to say that their news stories are always going to be skewed and flawed and wrong. It's just to say we have to understand this is how they're approaching this subject. Same thing with opinion pieces. You might read an opinion piece or an analysis that's not like straight up news. It's more of this person's ideas about a thing. And as long as we understand the perspective that it's coming from, and especially if it's being written by someone with authority, like an opinion piece from an economist or a professional or a journalist, that might still help us as long as we keep looking. We can't just find one perspective and quit. We have to find this perspective and then read the other perspective and read another perspective to really build a full synthesis of ideas. Next one is currency, which is how recent was this information published? Is this good? So the example I'll give is a book published in 1995 versus a news story from 2019. Both kind of have their pros and cons. A book is going to be more well-researched. It's going to have gone through a lot stronger vetting process to actually get published. But books don't get updated every day, right? This is now 26 years old. It may have been good information then. Whether it's good information now kind of depends on the subject. If we're talking about medicine and maybe some legal issues, a lot can change in 26 years. It doesn't mean this is totally bad, but we just need to understand the context in which this was created. Versus a news story. News stories are very much more up to date, but again, they're a slimmer slice of information, right? Because news stories get published every day, facts and things come out and make it updated. So it's going to be a little less researched, but more current. So if I'm looking at our last criteria of accuracy, News stories tend to be pretty accurate. Books published tend to be pretty accurate. It's just how that accuracy changes over time. So when you're looking at the accuracy of a source, we need to go through all of those like red flags for disinformation and misinformation, and making sure they have sources, and if they do have sources, that those are credible sources, and they're factually representing what's there. They're not just curating the facts and the details to present the side that they want to, right? Because all of these really fit together. Accuracy and perspective and currency, they all influence one another. So let's practice this. Let's take a look at an example. Open this guy up if I can. Maybe. There it is. All right. So here's an article. Say I'm doing a research study on gaming's effects on the human brain. I don't know. And I find this article that I just Google searched and found it, and it's saying that WHO makes gaming disorder official despite industry pushback. So the WHO is the World Health Organization. So the first thing I've got to look at is what site is this? Where am I? So I don't have no idea what TNW is. So I might do two quick things. I'm going to take a look at this company's webpage, try to figure out what they're about. And I'm even going to go down here, scroll all the way to the bottom, and try to find their About page. Okay. So TNW has been sharing, inventing, and advancing tech development since 2006. So they've been around a little while. Seems like they're focusing on technology. Okay. TNW has started to bring insight, meaning, and every now and again the lulls to the world of technology. Okay. So I see that and I'm like, well, they're doing some news reporting on technology, but it also seems like they're kind of focused on entertainment as well. So maybe not the best reporting in the world. But so far I don't have too many red flags. Let's take a look at the Next Web reliability. So I just searched the Next Web reliability because I've never heard of this website before. And there's this mediafactcheck.com or media bias fact check, which will just kind of give one other person's opinion on the reliability of this source. So right here, I can kind of see on this spectrum, the Next Web kind of leans in the middle, and that makes sense. If they're doing a lot of technology reporting, they're not necessarily going to lean to the left or to the right, because there's not a lot of bias in the idea of technology. They have kind of a mixed factual reporting review. Factual reporting rating is high, but here it says mixed. So it seems like they're decent. They're not great, but they're decent. I could probably use this source in my research paper if everything else checks out. So I also might take a look at who the author is, and luckily we've got a little link to her bio here. Rachel is a writer and a former game critic. Okay, cool. So it seems like she's done a lot of research on video games, which gives her a good background to talk about WHO. It seems like, okay, if this is your industry, you might do some research and really understand what the World Health Organization is saying about the subject that you're reporting on. And then lastly, of course, I'm going to read the article, but I might just take a look at some of these links. So I'm going to open up a couple here. And so this is a red flag. It's, okay, they're talking about some links about reporting that they did, and they link back to their own website. And that's not the worst thing to say, like, hey, we wrote about this at this time. But what I should be worried about is if every link they have is another link to a page inside their own website, right? I can't just make something true because I say it's true and be like, hey, look, I said this before, right? It's still true because I said it. I need outside credibility. I need some of that lateral reading for credibility. But they do get a plus on that next link that I opened up because it actually links to the World Health Organization's webpage. That's good. Last thing I might do is just Google search WHO gaming disorder. All right, and it looks like NPR reported on this, Time reported on this, CNN reported on this. So we have a lot of other news organizations reporting on this exact same idea. So this source pretty much checks out. I don't think I would give it the best review. I might take a look at it here. These are kind of the scores that I would give it, and obviously I'd give it an accuracy score after I read it, but it seems pretty current. Perspective definitely leaning towards the gaming industry bias, and authority is kind of a B-, where it's a gaming journalist. not a health reporter. No doctors were interviewed in this page. So it's not great, but not terrible. Usable, definitely, as long as, especially if I disclose, like, hey, here were this perspective and the bias and the authority of this source. Cool. Well, good luck, folks. We'll be practicing this, and I hope you can apply some of these criteria.